Good morning. I'm Deb Kidwell, Director of Technology Initiatives for the Midwestern Higher Education Compact, and I want to welcome you to our final entry in MEC's Cybersecurity webinar series. Today, our partners at BerryDunn will be leading a conversation around building a culture of information security. During the presentation, you may submit questions via the Q&A option at any time. Post-event, the resources from the webinar will be available on MEC's website, and we would appreciate it if you could take a few moments to complete the post-event survey. Before turning the presentation over to BerryDunn, I would like to take a moment to share some background about the Midwestern Higher Education Compact, also known as MEC. MEC was legislatively created and serves the Midwest Census region. MEC is one of 4 regional compacts in the U.S., the others being the New England Board of Higher Education, the Southern Regional Education Board, and the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education. MEC offers programs for post-secondary education institutions in areas such as property insurance, student health, military credit, open educational resources, research, policy and analysis, and of course, technology. The MEC Technologies program engages IT innovators and specialists representing technology, academia, students, and administration. This group provides strategic guidance to MEC on technology-related topics in higher education and helps identify opportunities for contracts that will serve higher education needs. One such opportunity was in the area of cybersecurity. MEC's institutions advised that this was an area where both contracts and education would be helpful. Our presenters for this entire cybersecurity webinar series were our partners that now hold a contract with MEC, and we are thrilled to have been able to provide this type of session through that partnership. Resources are available for each of our past events on the convening section of our website. MEC's Technologies Contract Programs is what we call a cost savings initiative designed for use by higher education IT and procurement offices. You can learn more about MEC contracts at mec.org/contracts or by contacting Nate Sorensen, MEC's Director of Government Contracts, or myself. We are here to help answer any questions you may have about using a MEC contract. With that, today's webinar is presented in partnership with BerryDunn. BerryDunn is an IT consulting, management consulting, and certified public accounting firm serving clients nationally. MEC's contract with BerryDunn allows for a customized consulting engagement to meet an institution's needs. With us today from BerryDunn are Joe Trino, a senior manager, Brian Hadley, a manager, Tyler Bartlett, a consultant, and Vienna Morrow, a senior manager. With that, Joe, I'm happy to turn the presentation over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Deb, for the introduction. We appreciate the opportunity to be with everyone today on such an important topic. My name is Joe Trino, and joining me is Brian Hadley and Tyler Bartlett. We're with our higher education team. And also joining us is Vienna Morrell, who leads our well-being practice. We will be presenting to you the culture, building a culture of information security. So we appreciate you being with us. And if you have questions throughout the presentation, please post those in the Q&A, and we'll address them when we can as we go through our time together. Next slide. So what does a culture of information security look like? We have a number of components that we feel are the building blocks of a culture of information security. And what we're going to do today is really walk through a process of taking these building blocks and really helping build that culture of information security in your organization. And we also want to share with you something new as far as a component of information security, and that is well-being and how that plays a role in developing a really healthy and strong culture of information security. And so that's an exciting topic as part of our presentation with you today. So we have 3 steps in this building a culture. The first is selecting the standards, assessing risk, and then the importance of well-being. So these 3 areas really are the focus of our presentation as we walk through this process with you today. So let's get started. Tyler, I'm going to turn it over to you if you want to begin with selecting standards.
Thank you, Joe. So the first piece of the construct that we're going to look at here today is administrative and technical controls. We've put them towards the bottom of the construct because they're a big piece of the foundation of an information security program. Administrative controls are the policies, procedures, standards, and guidelines that are put in place to set expectations for processes and practices. Technical controls, on the other hand, are the technology and configurations put in place to secure the systems and environments. Something that we've seen quite frequently is that organizations might have good technical controls in place, but lack robust administrative controls. And both are really needed to effectively mitigate risk. You need to have the safe practices and the safe environment put together to effectively mitigate your risk there. Now, these standards or these controls, the administrative and technical controls, don't need to come from scratch. You don't need to make your own. There are some internationally and nationally recognized frameworks out there that contain sets of administrative and technical controls that you can follow. I've listed a couple of them here on the left, some you might be familiar with. First, we have the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and they have quite a few frameworks or standards listed, but I have a couple highlighted here, which are more common, those being the Cybersecurity Framework, Special Publication 853, and Special Publication 800-171. Next, we have the International Standards Organization, which has their 27,000 series. And we also have the EDUCAUSE Higher Education Information Security Council, or HISC, who has created a targeted subset of these ISO controls intended for higher education institutions. Next, we have the Center for Information Security in their critical security controls. And finally, we have the Cybersecurity Maturity Model certification. Now we'll take a quick break and bring up the first polling question here. Is your institution or organization using an information security framework? And if so, which one? We have a couple listed here from that first slide, as well as an other or none option.
Okay, we have a few responses. I'll launch it here in just a second.
Thank you. Let's see. So we have some NIST 800-171, looks like some ISO, CIS, some other, and some none. Yeah, then that's perfectly all right. We see a mix of all these together, and the good news is a lot of them do contain a good core set of security standards or practices across all of them. Moving on to customization. We're still talking about the administrative and technical controls, but the standards that we just talked about, they're intended to be applicable to a wide range of organizations. And so a smaller mom and pop shop should not be expected to implement the same controls as a larger Fortune 500 company. And it's almost certain that they don't have the resources, whether it be money, manpower, skill, to maintain a similar information security program. And because of this, it's advised to take a risk-based approach to determine which controls should be implemented. Some factors to consider in this decision include data volume, how much data you have, data sensitivity, how sensitive your data might be, or the potential impact if it were to be disclosed to the public, and any compliance requirements. And when I say compliance requirements, I'm thinking of especially those who might need to work with protected health information, electronic transactions, or other categories of information that subject them to other compliance standards such as HIPAA or PCI. And so now when you think about not only the standard of the framework that you've chosen as the basis for your information security program, you also have these other frameworks required for compliance, such as HIPAA. And to And to make things a lot simpler, a lot easier, and to help avoid duplication, there are crosswalks out there to map standards or controls between standards. An example of one is something I've included on the bottom right-hand side of this slide that maps a whole lot of frameworks, including CIS, ISO, other NIST frameworks, and HIPAA over to the NIST cybersecurity framework. As I said, there are several controls across these frameworks that are common. And so I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Brian, to talk about one of those common controls and another foundation of a good information security program.
Tyler, thank you. So having identified a framework and the controls and customizing them to see what will work for your organization, that next building block that we want to look at here is awareness and training. So this is going to be important both for those individuals that are responsible for implementing those controls and your end users as well. We just heard Tyler talk about the different types of controls. And so when we think about this concept in information security, there's this idea of the 90-10 rule. And what that means is really that about 10% of the controls rely purely on technology. So the other 90% are relying on that human element where your users are the ones responsible for the controls. You're going to hear us say this again today, but what this really means is that your users are continually going to be your biggest threat. So how do those users, how do they know what they need to do? And how do they know what they shouldn't do for that matter? That's where your security awareness training program comes into play. We've identified here some of the topics that are common in security awareness training programs throughout the different types of frameworks that we looked at. We'll just run through a couple of them here just to give you an idea. So recognizing social engineering attacks. These are things like running phishing email simulations, what your users need to be on the lookout for. Authentication best practices has to do with how you're handling passwords and things like multi-factor authentication. Data handling, we heard Tyler just talk about kind of data classification and data sensitivity. So handling that data has to do with how you're sharing those types of files and using encryption and those sorts of things. As folks start to hopefully travel again in I guess not quite post-pandemic world, but maybe soon, we have to think about the ideas of insecure networks. So whether it's airport Wi-Fi, hotel Wi-Fi, Starbucks Wi-Fi, any network that you do not control should be considered an insecure network. And the users need to be aware of how they can safely use those networks with things like VPNs. To go along with that, safe browsing practices, what to look for on the web and be aware of links you shouldn't be clicking, sites you shouldn't be going to, not clicking on Facebook ads and things like that. And unfortunately, some of those things are going to continue to happen. So ultimately, your users also need to know how to report when those incidents do occur. So how can they alert someone that maybe they clicked on that link in the phishing email and what they need to do next? So that's just a little taste of the topics that should be included in the security awareness training program. But now that your users, staff, and leadership have that awareness, there really needs to be a way to assess if your controls and your people are doing what they should be doing to support the organization and this structure that we're building here. So really, when we talk about the assessments, the value of having a framework that we've been discussing is that there can be an organized and thoughtful approach to looking at how the controls are implemented and how effective they are. And the assessments usually come in two sorts of flavors, an internal and an external. And really, we'd like to see that internal assessment performed at least annually, and periodically having an outside objective set of eyes come in to verify that your internal assessments are accurate. We can look at some examples here, Tyler. I think. Oh, sorry. No, we have a polling question next. My apologies. So just thinking back to the awareness training that we talked about a moment ago, does your organization require completion of security awareness training? You might do it annually or less than annually, or maybe not at all. Annually, all right, that's good to see. Okay,
Some great numbers.
Yep, that's what we want to see right there. Thank you. So we've got again, with the framework in mind, we have this organized approach that we can take to assessing your controls and also assessing risk and sort of a risk-based approach. So these are some examples here of assessments. This is a NIST 853 example here. And as we go through, you see that there are findings identified that map to the certain controls and then recommendations as well. And we've have a risk rating here as well. This one is sort of cool. This is a an assessment of 4 identified of the critical security controls from CIS. And again, I think Tyler mentioned, that there's implementation groups in the CIS controls to really identify where you should be focusing your efforts. And as you take sort of a risk-based approach to help you prioritize your efforts in your information security program, these sorts of assessments kind of help you identify, again, where you need to focus your efforts first. And then this here is just an example of a little tear-out sheet identifying who will be responsible for implementing the control, and this helps to with accountability. So who's going to be responsible, understanding what the recommendations have been, and identifying the importance of implementing this recommendation and this control. And with that, I'll turn it over to Vienna.
Great, thank you, Brian. 90% of risk lies in the human factor. So what we'd like to do today is really try to humanize the discussion around cybersecurity by talking about well-being specifically. Go ahead, Tyler. So what does well-being have to do with information security? Let's start by defining well-being. Well-being is really what you think and feel about your life. It's influenced by a variety of dimensions: your physical and mental health, social connections, your financial wellness, your vocational satisfaction, sense of purpose, how you feel about your career. Well-being is really about people. So what we're doing is talking about these pillars, which you can see in the image to the right as we're building it. It's the pillars of your cybersecurity strategy that are very much dependent on the well-being of your people. So what happens when well-being is low? Chronically low well-being can lead to disengagement and burnout. Think about things like absenteeism, also presenteeism, which is when people are physically there at their desks and their seats, but they're distracted, they're disengaged, they're fatigued. So what then happens when people are disengaged and burned out? Threats may go unnoticed. Good security practices can slip, important steps can get left out, and communications can break down. All right, so we're going to pause there for a couple polling questions. The first one, does your institution have a formal well-being or wellness program for staff? All right, so a little bit of a mix here. Yes, that's great. I think, and I'm curious, I wish we had more time to dive into that, like how many of those programs are new, how many of those are wellness programs, how many of those are more comprehensive well-being programs. I know that that's been a lot of organizations are stepping up to more to the plate now when it comes to well-being somewhat, and then a couple who are saying either no or not that I know of. So let's go ahead with the next question. Is well-being part of the discussion when it comes to enterprise risk and or cybersecurity? Is this linkage something you thought of before? Or is this kind of something that's new? All right. So, and I'll be honest, this is a new angle that we're taking on this information as well. Our team's kind of coming together to talk about this. I have a background in IT security. I focus 100% of my time on well-being now, and it just seemed like a very, the connection kind of evolved organically for us. So I do think this is a newer conversation, but an important one when we talk about enterprise risk. Again, that human factor. Go ahead, Tyler. So unwell users present challenges. This is just a screenshot from the Ponemon Institute's 2022 report on the cost of insider threats, showing that, of course, these kind of purpley blue and orange figures being the insiders, the gray, I think, being external threats or incidents. So the majority are related to insider incidents. And the majority of those insider incidents are, of course, the negligent insider. And we can think of some contributing factors that very much root back to well-being. People are fatigued, they're burned out, they're disengaged, they're distracted. Also, when we think about those malicious institutes, are there some contributing factors that can kind of, trigger an employee to act maliciously, whether it be financial distress, interpersonal conflicts, distrust among teams, feeling unappreciated, or that lack of belonging. So organizations with strong well-being cultures will see less of these risk factors, whether the negligent or the malicious. So I want to just take a step back here and share this graphic. This is how we look at building cultures of well-being with our clients. And you'll notice we use the term well-being more often than we use the term wellness, and that's very intentional. The two terms are often used interchangeably, which is totally okay. But when we talk about well-being, we're really talking about whole person outcomes versus the traditional wellness focus on health outcomes. Well-being programs, we're talking much more holistically. You can see there's the 5 dimensions of physical, mental, career, financial, and social at the top, and different organizations can have different dimensions as well. But we're not only asking about what are the programs, the resources, the benefits that are in place to support these different dimensions contributing to someone's well-being, but also how does the work environment promote that culture of well-being? You can have all the best programs, resources, and benefits in the world. But if the work environment and the culture are not supportive of well-being, those things just won't matter because people won't feel empowered to use them. And this is particularly true for those employees who often need them the most. Go ahead. So today, when we talk about well-being and IT security, I think about it from two angles, two populations. The first being your IT staff, so the people that we rely on to identify, assess, respond to, and manage security risks. And then the second population being your users, the people we rely on to adhere to security policies and procedures, and also to identify and communicate those threats. All right, so here are a few data points that really validate what I think many of us already know, and that's that many of today's employees feel overwhelmed and stressed, and the IT professional is certainly no exception. This was true before the pandemic, and it's certainly for many been exacerbated by the pandemic. The vast majority of cybersecurity personnel, 80%, are feeling the stress, more so than before the pandemic. No big surprise there. IT was certainly on the front lines of the transition to remote and hybrid work, in addition to dealing with all sorts of other headaches, supply chain challenges, for example. And then also that 25% of IT security leaders are saying that their job affects their mental and physical health or physical health. And personally, I think that might be an underestimate. Then finally, the 65% who are thinking about leaving the profession. This is not even their job specifically, but cybersecurity itself due to work-related stress. This easily trumps the numbers that we see around the Great Resignation. I think it's about 40% of workers who are, last report I saw, who are considering leaving their jobs. So cybersecurity certainly seems to be at the pointy end of the Great Resignation stick. All this to say that if well-being and attention to topics like stress management and burnout is important for the average employee, that's perhaps even more important right now for our IT departments. So what do we do about this? And we'll start by talking about a few tips for how we might start to have the conversation about how we support the well-being of IT personnel. And I think, of course, it starts by setting the right tone at the top. And that's not just with your leadership, but also your managers. Managers are really important, perhaps the most important, in making sure that your messaging is aligned when it comes to really supporting people's well-being. And that also begins by exemplifying well-being, by role modeling, and by showing a little bit more, vulnerability and opening up the discussion so that people really feel trusted and like they're able to have those conversations about what they need in order to thrive in their careers. Meeting people where they're at. Well-being means different things to different people. It's really important to hear from your employees, to open up this discussion. There are ways you can do this, certainly with surveys. You can have facilitated team discussions around the well-being topics. And it's really great because this starts to normalize the conversation. Understanding and promoting the program's resources and benefits available to your teams. The majority of the people who responded to our poll question said that they do have wellness or well-being programs in place, their institution or organization. And even if you don't have a designated wellness or well-being program, there are probably things that your institution does to support well-being. So I would encourage you, have a conversation. If you have a designated well-being role in your organization or institution, or if it's just your HR team, talk to them. Let them know that you're concerned about your team, maybe bring them in and have them have a discussion and kind of shine a light on the different resources that are available to them to take advantage of. Emphasizing culture. Culture is just such an important element of all of this. I said it earlier, I'll say it again. Programs, resources, and benefits, that's all important, but it doesn't matter if the culture part isn't addressed first. And then reducing stressors. This may seem obvious, but how many times do we actually sit down and ask our employees, what is it that's causing you the most stress right now? And are there opportunities that available for us to improve upon this? And I think most often we'll find that there are trends and that there may be some very challenging issues that require some more work to address. There also may be some more things that people didn't realize have more obvious solutions. So again, that communication, that dialogue. And just really appreciating the value of retaining great people and recognizing that that extra investment in well-being, maybe giving people a little bit more space, reevaluating workloads, pays returns. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to take a pause here. We have a question
Oh, great.
in the chat you might want to address. David had asked, will you discuss the role of institution employee assistance programs as part of employee wellness and impact on security? Are these on your radar?
So I'm going to try to answer that question right now. And I can certainly talk about the role of EAP programs, employee assistance programs. That's a perfect example of one of those benefits that's often underutilized. And a lot of employees, even if they know about the employee assistance program, they have a very limited understanding of the different ways it can be used in the variety of services that are available through the EAP program. So that's a great example of having somebody from your HR team come into your department and talk about that, and just increase awareness and normalize it a little bit more. Does that answer the question? Feel free to pop in a follow-up question if you want more. I'll watch for that.
Thank you, Vienna.
Let's go ahead to the next slide. How IT can support the well-being of users. Okay, so talked about the IT department. Your users, IT certainly, the users are kind of outside of the realm of immediate influence for you as an IT leader or IT manager, but there's still things we can do to help support that. So really elevating well-being with the leadership team at your institution or organization, really making that clear connection between well-being and enterprise risk, and thinking about those insider threats and thinking about the concern around people being burned out and even just the implications of turnover and having to retrain IT staff on your team. So making it really clear that we need to take care of our people, not only for all the other reasons that exist, but also because it matters for IT security. Also considering well-being when planning IT changes and projects. So a lot of times, technology is a wonderful thing and can help us do our work better and more efficiently, and can be a stress reliever in many ways. It can also, big technology projects, technology implementations, when people hear that there are IT security threats, those can also be a source of stress and worry. So really taking that into consideration. Of course, there's only so much we can do to control that. But if we try to get ahead of it a little bit more by baking it into the planning, taking a change management approach, thinking about formalized change management practices as part of your IT projects can help both your internal team and the end users be able to manage the change with hopefully less stress. And then, thinking about how users might react to information you put out there and how you make information security a little less stressful for your end users. And then one other mention is that there are a lot of well-being apps and platforms and programs on the market right now. And I hear a lot of clients who are thinking about implementing these, and there's a lot, and they're great, they can be wonderful, but like any IT system implementation, a little planning goes a long way, and making sure that it's going to work with other systems if needed, making sure that it's implemented appropriately and has the right communication up front. So IT can be a really, really valuable partner in that conversation. And if your institution is thinking about doing something like that, I definitely suggest that IT have a representative at the table for those conversations.
Thank you, Vienna. And I think now, this is kind of a return to the first slide. where we had all the pieces for this culture of information security scattered all over the page. And during the presentation, we walked you through building, starting with administrative and technical controls, adding some awareness and training to support your users, your IT staff, and your leadership, ultimately, building to a culture of compliance and risk mitigation. And we also have the tree in the sunshine here because we've added well-being as a very important piece to this picture as well. And so I will hand it over to Joe Treno to wrap us up here.
Yeah, thank you, Tyler. I want to just, thank everyone for joining us today. Certainly, an important topic like this is important to highlight, and certainly the incorporation of well-being into the practices and building a culture of information security, I think, can really help organizations in higher education really strengthen their ability to really address the constant threats that these organizations have. And our people are our most important asset. And so I think that's important to point out. Just a few minutes, I want to just spend a little bit about who we are. BerryDunn has been in business over 47 years, and we've been providing advisory services for 30 plus years. And we are focused primarily on, our team is focused primarily on higher education, colleges, universities, and systems. And we are working collaboratively with Vienna in her practice of well-being and really incorporating a lot of the methodologies and really thinking around well-being into the work that we do. And the box on the right-hand side is just a subset of some of the services that we provide related to information and risk security. And we are objective and independent, and this is something that we are very proud of. We have a successful track record, and we are focused on value. Our client satisfaction rating is something that we are proud of, and we do this on an annual basis with our clients. And so we are really happy to be with you today and have the opportunity to present this important topic. And if there is any follow-up questions, or you have want to reach out and discuss any aspects of what we presented to you today, or even have a question about well-being, feel free to reach out to us. Our contact information is on this slide. And we are proud members of MEC, and we are here for you if you need anything or have any questions. So I am told that this presentation will be available to all MEC members on the website. And so that will likely be available sometime this afternoon. And again, thank you again very much for your time. And we appreciate the time that we were able to spend with you today. So for all of us, thank you very much.